Nowadays, when people think about Ukraine, they think about war, violence, drone attacks, missiles, or just about the colossal amount of life lost. But one aspect that's often overlooked is the nature in Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is beautiful. It's part of what we call the green heart of Europe. In Ukraine alone, we can find habitat for 35% of all of Europe's biodiversity. Around spring every year, while bears end their hibernation and wild ungulates are raising their young, about 1,000 black storks and some 30,000 white storks migrate into Ukraine. Except this one year where a different type of animal crossed the border. Russians. In 2022, Russia launched their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, an operation that was supposed to be 3 days long. We're now in 2026 and nothing is resolved. Russia is moving into Ukraine slower than a snail would have. And they've been fighting against Ukraine longer than they did back in the days against the Nazis. After being an ally of the Nazis, a part of history that is often forgotten about. And while this is leading nowhere, the only thing that seems to be growing is the damage inflicted on people. On people, but on nature also. Nature is always thought second when a war happens. Ukraine's nature has been suffering a lot since Russia invaded Crimea in 2014. About those animals that I talked about earlier, most of them are gone. Spring is the time of the year for animals to move in search for food, to mate or to raise their young. When Russia attacked, this just disrupted the whole ecosystem. Quiet places that were peaceful became literal front lines. And this is only a fraction of the real environmental harm that is being done here. The Ukrainian government described the war as, on top of all other crimes, an act of ECOCIDE. In June 2022, the Minister of Environment of Ukraine estimated the cost of war at around $6.6 billion. Now the real estimate is around $56 billion. And only 2 weeks after the war started, the air in Kyiv had a pollutant concentration 27 times higher than normal. While Ukraine sounds very cold, and trust me it is, there are a lot of wildfires. Around 1.7 million hectares of forest are affected by war, around 15% of the country's total forest area. Climate change hasn't been very helpful as well. In 2024, Ukraine lost so much forest area that it's basically twice as much as what the whole of Europe lost the same year. And obviously all of those wildfires happens on the front lines. Also, before all of this, wildfires in Turkey, some part of Europe and Siberia were extinguished by Russian military aircraft. Not anymore. On one side, because there's no way Europe and Russia help each other ever again, but even in Siberia, Russian territory, those military aircraft are now needed for war. And Russia suffered major heat waves. Sorry, can't help you, the planes are gone killing other people. The forest, when they're not burning, is still suffering. Around 30% of all protected area in Ukraine are affected by shelling, bombing, oil pollution and military maneuvers. Forest management in conflict zone has been suspended, which increased the risk of illegal logging, throwing away years and years of efforts to support sustainable forest management. In protected areas, Russians dig trenches, build fortifications and plant mines. In the Grand Meadow National Nature Park, a conservation program has been taking care of spring meadow saffron for the past 16 years. All of it to be destroyed by Russian tanks moving through the protected area. The Jarilhaj National Nature Park, home to rare endemic herbs, wild boars, foxes and deers, became an active fighting zone. The park was later, in 2023, declared destroyed because of Russian armed aggression. The pollution often comes indirectly, but also very directly. Like on April 4, 2022, when a Russian missile was shot down and fell onto a farm. Reservoirs of fertilizer were hit and leaked. Luckily, the reservoirs were mostly empty, but the amount that leaked was enough to poison the river Ikva. On the 21st of May of the same year, in the Siversko-Donetsk region, a tank of nitric acid was hit. It exploded and created a cloud that forced all the locals to hide in shelters. These two events are not special. Ukrainian observers registered more than 2,000 similar events, and that was in 2022. Here, agriculture is very important. It's 11% of the GDP and 60% of all exports. The soil is high in level of organic matter and rich in nutrients, so keeping the soil healthy is very important. 40% of the soil in Ukraine is affected by threat of erosion because of toxic chemicals like lead, mercury or arsenic. If those manage to enter the food chain, this will result in huge problem for public health. Many areas that were affected by war in the world are just not fit for farming anymore. The plants would just absorb the pollutant. Depending on the access to water and oxygen and the soil pH, a polluting ammunition can take between 100 and 300 years to degrade. Abandoning those areas just won't solve the problem. Because of monocultures, if those areas are abandoned, invasive species are just gonna spread fast and the mice population is gonna explode, which can be very harmful for the ecosystem, and they'll probably get contaminated by the pollutant as well.
Я бачу квіти у твоїх очах.
Animals suffer a lot from this war, mainly because of environmental damage, but they're also directly targeted by Russian drones. For absolutely no reason, drone footage show how some Russians killed them on purpose. Other than that, there are also collateral damage for bombings. Fires, explosions and vibrations scares them away. Birds leave to nest somewhere else and the whole food chain is disrupted. When vehicles cross rivers, they pollute waters with fuel and lubricant, directly poisoning larvae from insects, disrupting the whole food chain once again. Because if there's no insects, how can frogs survive? And if the frogs leave or die, how can cranes survive? Counting that this war began in spring, when animals are at their weakest, this just made the whole mess even worse. Russian soldiers built camps on coastal reserves and wetlands, so some birds completely changed their migration routes. But on top of everything, the destruction of dams is one of the biggest disasters. Those destroy vast areas and can also contaminate soil and water. In February 2022, a dam on the Irpin River near Kozarovichi was destroyed by Russian troops. This resulted in a flood that extended to 10 kilometers, or in June 2023 when the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed, the largest reservoir in Ukraine by volume, sending 90% of its content downstream. This released 14 tons of liters of fresh water, which flooded many settlements and killed at least 35 people. The flood also killed animals on its way. The flood destroyed a fish farm that was trying to bring an endangered sturgeon back in the Dnipro River. This species is now almost lost. Or in August 2024, when Russia just dumped chemicals in the village border of Tyotkino in the same river. The pollution crossed the border and arrived in the Sumy region. The whole ecosystem of the same just collapsed. More recently, Ukraine has been suffering regular blackouts in a harsh winter. And in order to get their power back, many people use a generator. Walking around town, you can see them everywhere, but mainly you can hear them. They are powered by diesel and so they are very polluting. Those blackouts are the results of strike on energy infrastructure. Something that could actually help the current energetic situation would be local renewables. Take for example the city where I am right now, Zhytomyr. Zhytomyr has been suffering significant less power outage than other cities. So much that they're studying it to apply it to a national level. But how do they do it, you ask? By being efficient and producing their own electricity. Zhytomyr is home to a biomass plant, producing heat and electricity locally. They also have many solar panels installed on houses, parking and sewage pumping facilities. Hospitals and institutions also have their own solar panels, which makes them less dependent on the grid. They also have a waste processing plant, which turns waste into electricity. But what's really important with all of those is that it's local. They're also designed to be very efficient and get improved really regularly. For example, 80,000 streetlights were replaced by LEDs, which reduced the electricity consumption of the lighting network by 50%. Water pipes were also replaced, which reduced water leaks and the load on pumping equipment, which reduced the electricity consumption of the Vodo Canal by 27%. The city also aims to be climate neutral by 2050 and may be home to the first floating solar plant. This is an ongoing project on the Teteriv River. There's still some hope for the future of Ukraine, but in order to start acting, first the war needs to stop. And the problem with negotiating with Russia is how do you negotiate with someone who's broken a ceasefire and treaty several times? But once the war will be over, that Putin will be 6 feet under and that Russia will start paying for Ukraine's recovery, the future doesn't seem so bad. Obviously, rebuilding is gonna pollute immensely. It requires a lot of resources and it will produce a lot of greenhouse gas. That's why there are many associations that are planning to help Ukraine rebuild better. Doing this through a circular economy and choosing wisely how to rebuild Ukraine and how to recycle the city. The rebuild should be done with vigorous climate and biodiversity safeguards in order to not hurt Ukraine's environment further. That's what Europe calls a green recovery, basically rebuilding the city with recycled materials or low-emission materials such as timber, recovering the electricity grid with renewables and not switch back to fossil fuel alternatives. This more than ever is crucial for Ukraine. If they can produce electricity locally and in a climate-friendly way, foreign influence would never happen again. This is a lot of words, but we just need to wait to see how it translates into actions. As bold and disrespectful as it sounds, war brings a lot of opportunities to rebuild your city better. In Europe, after the Second World War, many cities managed to rebuild according to their time. That time it was putting a big highway through the center, so not the best. But in Ukraine, that could be making the cities greener, more resilient and updating the whole transportation network. If Ukraine managed to pull through all their plans and actually make a green recovery, it could become a nation of the future. And who knows, maybe even reach that their Paris goal earlier. When you look at how much Ukraine suffered and still stand proudly and strongly, it's almost sure their future is bright and green, given that Europe actually do something other than just condemning. That's why more than ever, Europe should help Ukraine fight for its sovereignty. This dam that I talked about, the Kakhovka Dam, it was actually built in the Soviet era, and once Russia destroyed it, all the water left, and soil that was underwater since the Soviet era was open to grow once again. On this soil, a new canopy of willow and poplar trees covered more than 140,000 hectares. A local ecologist said it looked like a primordial forest of 100,000 years ago. New freshwater streams and wetlands are appearing. Wildlife and biodiversity is flourishing. Wild boars and other mammals are coming back. And there's even been sighting of the endangered sturgeon. Some of the saplings are already 4 meters tall. This forest in 50 years will be something like nowhere else. Ukraine and its people are like this forest. No matter how much suffering and attack they have to endure, their resilience and their unity can flourish into a bright future. But this will only happen once they're free of this Soviet presence that will soon, like the dam, be destroyed. In this video, I mainly spoke about nature, because nature is innocent in this war, as is Ukraine and its people. Once again, idiocy and imperialism just crush innocent. Here's how you can help. The most obvious solution is to donate, so check out the description and just check out those QR codes if you want to donate to Ukraine. But if you want to have an effect with your daily life, just get informed. Know why the war is horrible and don't just repeat things you hear. Try to understand things and develop your critical thinking. This will mainly protect you from Russian propaganda. I'm not asking you to become an activist, but just when someone is being an idiot, just tell them directly. You see, the best way to be tolerant is to be intolerant of intolerance. You should also be welcoming to refugees. It's not that complicated to have empathy and just not be an idiot. People often underestimate how much their opinion have influence in politics, so vote wisely. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's a topic that's really special to me. Each war that happens and each atrocity that those last year brings just prove that information is key, and that's the reason I do those videos, is to inform people about climate and the world in general. People are just being misled. Thank you for watching, and Slava Ukraini!
Душу и тіло ми положим за нашу свободу.